Pretty soon I'll be scratching, please. Move it on.
10 songs Hank Williams wrote, and 10 artists who took them somewhere Hank never got to see.
I know that
You already know these songs. Some of you know every word. But for more than a few of them, the version living rent-free in your head was never Hank's to begin with. Tonight we're pulling that thread all the way back. Number 10, Move It On Over, George Thorogood, 1978. A guitar riff hits before you know what you're hearing. And if you grew up around rock radio in the late 70s or early 80s, you know exactly which one I mean. That low, grinding groove coming out of the bar speaker or the car stereo. You just might not know it was written in Alabama in 1947. George Thorogood was a kid from Wilmington, Delaware, building a reputation on the Boston Blues Club circuit when he cut Move It On Over for Rounder Records in 1978. Small folk label, no major machine behind him, just a band that had been earning it, one sweat-soaked room at a time. Here's what nobody saw coming. That album, Move It On Over, went gold. 47 weeks on the Billboard 200, the title track hit heavy FM rotation, landing in playlists alongside Led Zeppelin and the Allman Brothers, on radio stations that had never played a steel guitar in their lives. Now, Hank Williams wrote Move It On Over in 1947 as his first MGM single, a jaunty, comic honky-tonk story about a man locked out of his own house after a late night, negotiating sleeping arrangements with the family dog. Pure storytelling, built for jukebox play. It did what it was supposed to do and then settled quietly into the catalog. Then Thorogood heard something else in it. He stripped the country off and ran it through a hard blues rock engine. Faster tempo, harder guitar, the same melody, the same lyric, a completely different engine underneath. A whole generation of rock fans fell in love with that riff without ever tracing it back to a man who'd been dead for 25 years. Some of them still haven't, and there's something Hank Williams about that. He wrote songs for whoever needed them, and he didn't put conditions on the finding. Number 9, You Win Again, Jerry Lee Lewis, 1957. This one's a piece of trivia that will genuinely stop people when you say it out loud. In December 1957, Jerry Lee Lewis released one of the most explosive rock and roll singles of all time, Great Balls of Fire. The song that felt like the whole decade catching up to where he already was. You know it, everyone knows it. The B-side of that single was a Hank Williams song, You Win Again, was something Hank had written on July 11, 1952, one day after his divorce from his first wife Audrey was finalized. If you know the lyric, a man who knows he's losing and can't stop loving anyway, you're not listening to a country music convention. You're listening to a real human being, writing from a specific moment of documented pain. His producer Fred Rose had to talk him into even calling it You Win Again. Hank wanted to call it I Lose Again. Jerry Lee Lewis cut his version that same year he recorded Great Balls of Fire, and You Win Again climbed to the top 5 on the country charts on its own, which means in late 1957 and into 1958, you had the same artist putting out the wildest rock and roll record anyone had heard, and a Hank Williams country ballad, and both of them charting at the same time. That says something about the song. A country heartbreak lament that could ride on the B-side of Great Balls of Fire and not get swallowed. That's not a cover. That's proof the song was built from something that didn't depend on genre or era to work. Hank originally wanted to call it I Lose Again. Sitting with that title, you hear the whole thing differently.
Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story.
Number 8, Jambalaya on the Bayou, The Carpenters, 1973.
For tonight down, we're gonna see Mama Cheryl Leo.
Depending on where you grew up and what era you came up in, this one might be your number 1. Jambalaya on the Bayou is Hank Williams' most recorded song. He released it in July 1952, and it sat at number 1 on the country charts for the better part of 14 weeks.
We're gonna see Mama Cheryl Leo. Big guitar.
Joe Stafford took a pop version to number 3 on the pop charts the same year. Fats Domino had his own version a decade later. John Fogerty cut it under the name Blue Ridge Rangers in 1973, but the version that reached international audiences, listeners who couldn't place Hank Williams on a map and had never heard of the Louisiana Hayride, belonged to Karen and Richard Carpenter.
Crawfish pie, Billy Gumbo. For tonight,
Richard had started the instrumental track in 1972. The story goes that when they were under pressure to finish their Now and Then album in 1973, he had Karen add vocals to a track he'd already laid down. There wasn't time to write something original, so Karen Carpenter, whose voice had perfect, almost architectural clarity, sang a song Hank Williams had started writing on a tour bus in Louisiana, with a melody built on a Cajun folk song he'd heard the musicians playing.
dressed in style, they go hog wild, me oh my oh.
She made no effort to sound Southern. She didn't try to approximate Cajun, she just sang it. And internationally, the UK, Japan, Germany, Holland, it moved. That's Jambalaya doing what it always does. The song is about good food, good people, and the chance to put everything hard behind you for one night. That idea doesn't need a Bayou. It doesn't need a translation.
A kinfolk come to see Yvonne by the dozen.
If you've heard Karen Carpenter's voice come through a radio and not known who wrote it, you already know what I mean.
And he'll catch all the fish in the bayou.
Number 7, Long Gone Lonesome Blues, Hank Williams Jr., 1964. The kind of story that gets heavier the longer you sit with it. In early 1964, a 14-year-old boy from Shreveport, Louisiana, walked into a recording studio and recorded his dead father's song as his own debut single. Hank Williams Jr. was 3 years old when his father died on New Year's morning, 1953. 3 years old, he grew up learning songs he couldn't remember hearing. His voice, when it finally changed and the recording happened, bore a resemblance to Hank Sr.'s that nobody could quite account for. It wasn't imitation. It was something stranger, like a river finding the same path through different ground. Long Gone Lonesome Blues had been one of his father's biggest country hits back in 1950, a walking blues structure, that aching honky-tonk quality. Hank Sr.'s voice full of the thing that made everything he touched sound like it was coming from somewhere real. Hank Jr.'s debut version climbed to number 5 on the country charts. And here's the weight of it. The whole time Hank Jr. was building those early years, his mother Audrey was managing him, dressing him like his father, coaching him to perform like his father, building a career around a resemblance to a man her son didn't remember meeting. That's a strange and specific kind of grief to hand a child and call it opportunity. He eventually found his own voice. Took him years, a near-fatal mountain climbing accident in 1975, and the better part of a decade. But he found it. For now, though, 1964, a 14-year-old who had never known his father, recording his father's song as his introduction to the world. If you grew up without someone and still carried them, you already know what that costs.
river, but the doggone river was dry.
Number 6, Your Cheatin' Heart, Ray Charles, 1962. This is the one where the definition of what country music was allowed to be started to move. Hank Williams wrote Your Cheatin' Heart on September 23, 1952, the same single session that produced Kaw-Liga and 2 other tracks. His last studio day. He was dead 9 weeks later at 29. The song was released posthumously and became the most iconic thing attached to his name. It spent weeks at number 1 on the country charts and eventually lent its title to a 1964 Hollywood biopic. Then, in 1962, Ray Charles released Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music. You have to understand what that album was, not just as a record but as an event. Ray Charles, one of the architects of R&B and soul, recording an entire album of country songs and putting it on a major pop label. It went to number 1 on the pop album chart, 14 weeks. It proved something that Nashville hadn't been in a hurry to prove, that the emotional architecture inside country music was universal. Your Cheatin' Heart appeared on the 2nd volume of that series. In Ray Charles' hands, it became a different thing. The same lyric, the same grief, but filtered through a voice that had spent years finding the exact place where gospel and the blues and modern pop all bent toward each other. It was still Hank's song, it just spoke in a different dialect. What gets me is the plain fact of it. Ray Charles walked into country music's deepest heartbreak catalog and said, "This belongs to me too." And the music agreed with him. Hank Williams wrote for everyone who had ever been left. Ray Charles knew the address. Number 5, Kaw-Liga, Charlie Pride. This one starts with the strangest song Hank Williams ever put his name on. Kaw-Liga was recorded at Hank Williams' final studio session on September 23, 1952, the same day he cut Your Cheatin' Heart. The premise is unlike anything else in his catalog. A wooden Indian statue standing outside a trading post, silent and motionless, quietly in love with a wooden Indian maid in the antique store across the street. He never speaks. He never reaches out. And one day she's sold away, and he's still standing there, still silent. The song went to number 1 on the country charts in early 1953, released posthumously, weeks after Hank was gone. Now, Charlie Pride was born in 1934 in Sledge, Mississippi. He became one of the very few black artists to build a sustained career in mainstream country music at a time when that required something beyond talent, a kind of resolve that doesn't have a clean name. He won 3 Grammy Awards. He's a Country Music Hall of Fame inductee, and through his career, he returned again and again to Hank Williams' catalog. It was a deliberate claim, a statement about belonging. There's something about the image of Kaw-Liga, a figure standing in the doorway of a world he loves, loving something he can't fully reach, in a space that wasn't built for him, that feels like it chose Charlie Pride as much as he chose it. Whether he ever read it that way, I can't say, but some songs find their right singer not just for the melody, for the weight of what you have to carry to mean them. Number 4, I Can't Help It, If I'm Still in Love with You, Linda Ronstadt, 1974. This one's about what happens when the right voice finds the right song 23 years after it was written. Hank Williams put I Can't Help It on the charts in 1951, where it went to number 1. The premise is almost insultingly simple. You walk past an old love on the street and realize you never stopped feeling it. The title is the whole emotional argument. There's no strategy in it, no resolution, just the plain fact of something that persists, regardless of what you've decided. In 1974, Linda Ronstadt recorded it for her album Heart Like a Wheel. Sneaky Pete Kleinow played steel guitar on the track, and something happened in the combination of that song, that voice, that arrangement, that particular California country rock moment. It sounded like the song had been waiting. The following year, she won the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance for it. Think about that. A song Hank Williams wrote in 1951, earning a Grammy in 1975. 24 years and two completely different musical worlds, and the song moved between them without losing a thing. And here's what I keep coming back to when I hear that version. Linda Ronstadt didn't cover Hank Williams, she inherited him, the way the right person inherits anything, not by copying it, but by understanding it deeply enough to carry it forward in your own hands. There's a feeling in that song you've probably had. You're somewhere ordinary, a street, a grocery store, a radio coming through someone else's window, and something hits you, and you realize the past isn't as far back as you thought it was. If you've had that moment, Hank Williams described it first. Linda Ronstadt just made sure you heard it. Number 3, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, Elvis Presley, 1973.
Did you ever see?
January 14th, 1973. Honolulu International Center Arena. Elvis Presley is performing the first ever live satellite concert broadcast to audiences around the world. Aloha from Hawaii. More than 1 billion people watching across dozens of countries. A bigger television audience than the Apollo moon landing in some of the markets carrying it.
The silence of.
And at some point in the show, Elvis steps to the microphone and says, "This is probably the saddest song I've ever heard." Then he performs, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." Hank Williams wrote the song in 1949 and recorded it as a B-side. For years, country radio didn't know what to do with it. Too spare, too quietly devastating, not enough motion to drive a jukebox. Just Hank's voice and the images, a whippoorwill too blue to fly, the silence of a falling star, a midnight train crying in the distance. Images that go straight to the part of you that has ever sat alone at 2 a.m. and wondered if anybody else on earth feels this specific way.
Did you ever see?
Elvis slowed it down even further. He opened every space in it and let it breathe. The performance on the Aloha broadcast is not a rock and roll number. It's not even a country number. It's a man, on the biggest stage of his life, telling 1 billion people that a Hank Williams B-side from 1949 was the saddest thing he had ever encountered. That's not a cover. That's testimony.
The silence of.
And there's something about that moment that keeps landing every time I think about it. Elvis Presley, the most famous solo performer who ever lived, used the biggest concert in television history to point back at a man who had been dead for 20 years. Like he needed you to know who got there first. Number 2, Hey Good Lookin, Joe Stafford and the Mitch Miller Machine, 1951 to 52.
How's about cooking something up with me?
This one isn't just about a song. It's about the moment Nashville's door opened to a room it didn't know existed. Hank Williams wrote Hey Good Lookin in 1951, and it went straight to number 1 on the country charts.
So we can go steady, go how's about saving all.
Different from his Heartbreak catalog, lighter, almost playful, winking at you from the first line, this was Hank in a good mood, which he could be when the world cooperated.
About keeping steady company.
What happened next was Mitch Miller. Miller was the head of A&R at Columbia Records in New York. He understood something that Nashville hadn't fully processed yet, that the emotional core of Hank Williams songs could survive any arrangement, any accent, any era. When Tony Bennett's version of Cold Cold Heart went to number 1 on the pop charts in 1951,
A brand new recipe. I got a hot.
Miller didn't treat it like a fluke. He treated it like a map. He started sending his Columbia artists into the studio to work Hank Williams' catalog with intent. Joe Stafford, one of the defining voices of American pop in that era, had already taken Jambalaya to number 3 on the pop charts in 1952, part of that same pipeline. Hey Good Lookin' and other Hank Williams songs followed into pop arrangements, pop productions, pop radio. The same songs, different rooms, different America.
I'm free, I'm ready.
Here's the thing about Hey Good Lookin' specifically. It proved that the crossover didn't depend on Hank's sadness. It wasn't just heartbreak that translated, it was everything. The joy, the flirtation, the whole voice. When Mitch Miller's artists took Hank Williams' playful songs and dressed them in strings and pop production, they still worked, because the writing was that good regardless of what was underneath it.
Say, hey, good looking.
Number 1, Cold, Cold Heart, Tony Bennett, 1951.
Cold heart.
Number 1. And this is the entry where the story of every other song on this list begins. Tony Bennett recorded Cold, Cold Heart on May 31st, 1951.
And now my heart is pain.
It was released that July. Orchestral arrangement, warm production, New York all the way through. And it went to number 1 on the pop charts, where it stayed for 6 weeks. The same song had already been a number 1 country hit for Hank Williams earlier that year. So in the summer of 1951, the same piece of writing was living simultaneously in 2 completely different musical worlds.
Another love before my time.
For the first time, in hard numbers, country music had proven that a song born in the rural South could reach anyone, anywhere. That the emotional content was universal enough to survive arrangement changes, accent changes, audience changes. Mitch Miller at Columbia saw the numbers and started building a pipeline that lasted for years. It opened the door for everything we talked about in entry number 2.
And now my heart is pain.
And the story goes that after Bennett's version topped the charts, Hank Williams called him. The version you hear most often, Tony, Hank said, "Why did you ruin my song?" He was joking. Both men knew it. But underneath the joke is the real story.
Lonesome past keeps us so far.
Hank Williams, a man who would be dead 18 months later at 29 years old, had written a song about the exhaustion of loving someone difficult, about the cold-heartedness of being loved halfway, about his real marriage to his real wife Audrey. He wrote it out of personal pain.
For the things I didn't do.
And a New York pop singer took it to the top of the pop charts. He didn't ruin the song. He proved it was bigger than its container, bigger than its genre, bigger than its region, bigger than the particular life it came from. And everything else on this list, every artist, every crossover, every decade, started right there, with that phone call, and that joke, and that number 1.
Made your heart sad and